Is a Python-based tool that allows you to interact with the Qumulo cluster either by running commands directly on a node or via remote installation of the tool. QQ message is sent to any node on your cluster through port 8000, and the traffic is encrypted via TLS. So the Qq CLI requires Python 3.8 and above, and Linux, Mac, or Windows WSL. We do have a PowerShell module under development, but we will not be covering that on this presentation. So installing QQ on your local computer is very easy. The quickest way to do this is to go to your Qumulo clusters UI and navigating over to the API and Tools tab, and then clicking on the Download QQ Command Line Tool button. If you have already done this, you should be able to follow along with some of our examples today. So the Qq CLI is obviously also available on all Qumulo nodes. Now, running QQ directly on a node is not recommended beyond the initial install of the cluster or for troubleshooting purposes. And the reason for this is that the Qumulo node is not considered a general purpose machine, and some QQ commands can actually generate quite a bit of output that if you're processing it with other command line tools, you might have memory consumption issues, so you should be running this remotely. Now, this presentation assumes that we are running the Qq CLI remotely, so pretty much all the examples you see is with the perspective of running the tool remotely and not in a Qumulo node. So, the account to be used with the CLI should have the correct role-based access control rights configured for whatever tasks you're trying to accomplish. These roles can be configured quite granularly in a way that would allow for the principle of least privilege. So you don't have to create an account that has all the rights to get some use out of the Qq CLI. You can just specify which rights you need. AD domain or local users can be added to RBAC roles. So how do you connect to the Qumulo cluster? QQ expects an argument called host, which will point to the Qumulo cluster you want to communicate with. Then authentication will be triggered via a login command. So here's an example what that looks like. I have QQ, then I specify which host I want to connect to. I give it the API command login, and then I give it the user account that I'm trying to connect with. Now, once I'm logged in, a credentials file is created in your home folder called qfsd_cred, and this has an authentication token that would be valid for the next 10 hours. So you can also specify a custom path using the credential store option, and this will allow you to connect to multiple clusters, for example. So many of our customers have multiple Qumulo clusters, and they all have different login requirements, and you can have multiple credential store files. So here's the basic syntax of a QQ command. The QQ CLI accepts a number of different positional arguments, followed by the actual API command, which then is followed by the API command's own arguments. So these are position sensitive. So anything that is related to QQ itself has to come at the front before you introduce the first API command. So all the stuff here in blue, it relates to the QQ CLI itself, followed by the API command, followed by the API command's own arguments right there. So how do we check which version of the CLI we are running? The version you're running should match the version of your Qumulo core. We do have some wiggle room there. You can actually use the CLI that's a little bit outdated or use a CLI that's a little newer. But it might be that you have some commands on your CLI that do not exist on your cluster. Now you can verify the version of the Qq CLI tool itself by giving it a -- version flag. And you can also check the version that is running in your Qumulo, the actual Qumulo core software running in your Qumulo, by giving it the version command. So it's a little confusing here, but you see the difference is that this is a QQ command, while this is an API command. Now, if you want to update the Qq CLI, You simply replace the executable with the current version that is provided by your cluster. Very easy. You just toss the old one and get the new one going there. So a list of all the different API commands is easily available just by running Qq-H. If you run this on your Qq CLI, you get an output of all the different commands. Quite a bit of stuff comes out. So you can then want to, yes.
Sorry, we have a quick question from a newer user who just wants to know what QQ is and why would someone want to use it.
Totally, perfect question. So Qq is a tool that allows you to interact with the Qumulo API to get information about data in your cluster, to change feature sets, to change features, pull analytics from the cluster, pull information about your users. Very good question. I guess I should have explained that right at the start. But it's just a way to manage your cluster and a way to manage, to get information from your cluster. You can do this remotely or you can do this on a node. It's one of the primary ways for you to interact with your Qumulo cluster that is not the web UI. The other option would be to use the REST API or the PowerShell module. Hopefully that answers your question. So again, you can find all the different API commands. Here's an example of what you can do with the QQ API. You have the QQ command running locally on your cluster. You're logged in. I'll show live examples of this here, but then I want to find all the commands that relate to SMB. So I'm going to take the output of Qq-H here, help. It lists all the commands, that's all it does. Then I want to grab for anything that has SMB in the name very easily. Then I get all the different commands related to the SMB protocol. Now, further help is available by adding --help to the API command arguments themselves. So I can get all the commands, but then I can get information about the API command by giving it --help. So this would be specific to SMB list shared and not necessarily QQ here. Now, a lot of these API commands will also contain context-aware help that will provide extra information based on which arguments I have already typed. So in some cases, I can type QQ some command, give it some arguments, and sometimes based on whatever arguments I have already typed, that --help at the end will give me a little bit different help based on whatever I already have typed in there, which is pretty handy. So to kind of help answer that question that came up, what can we do with these API commands? So there's different broad categories of what API, the QQ API can do for you. You can pull the status of your cluster. You can look at the configuration of the cluster, look and modify the configuration of the cluster. You can configure the different features like snapshots, quotas, replication. You can pull information about your users that the Qumulo cluster is aware of, like the main users or NFS users. You can manage your files. You can pull information about those files. And then you can also look at data usage and cluster analytics. So the output of QQ commands will be available in two different formats: human readable and JSON. Commands that default to human readable can also be output in JSON by providing the --JSON flag at the end. So here's an example of what that would look like. If I were to look at permissions, I want to look at the permissions on this particular directory here. So I give it --path, this directory. Then I give it a --JSON flag, will give me the raw format, because this is a command that normally comes out in human readable by default. So there's several utilities that you can use on your local machine to help parse through this JSON output. JSON is a format that a JavaScript object notation format is kind of an industry standard. It's a little kind of ugly looking if you are not familiar with it at first, but it's very easy to find the values you're looking for and very easy to feed those values into other tools. So the JQ utility is something that for sure you want to have installed in your machine, because it provides quite advanced capabilities for parsing and creating new JSON objects. It includes pattern matching, logical comparators, conditional statements. It's actually a mini programming language by itself. And JQ would actually simplify shell tasks that you would otherwise have to use a combination of tools you might be already familiar with, like grep, awk, sed, tr. You replace all that with a single tool. It makes things quite a bit easier. Now, JQ is readily available via apt, brew, yum, or whatever package manager your environment might already be using. Highly, highly recommend you install this. Most of the examples we're going to work with will be using JQ. So you can streamline your Qq CLI experience on your local machine by doing a couple of different things. You can create a shell alias to cover commonly required arguments like host and credential store. And this allows you to handle multiple Qumulo clusters. So I can say I have QQQ points to one cluster. QQM, like in my case here, I'll show you in a second, points to a different cluster. Just so I don't have to keep typing host and credential store every time. Then you add those aliases to your shell's profile. And then you can also enable tab completion locally. We support rcomplete for Python. And we have a doc that describes how to do this. I'll make this link available. I don't want you guys to kind of work through the link right now because it will be a little bit distracting, but I'll make this link available later. And I'll show you what the tab completion locally looks like. This saves you a bunch of time. So we're going to move on to the hands-on demo here in a second. And in this demo, we're going to work through some of these tasks here. I'm going to list the rights of my current API user. We're going to find out what the serial numbers and current states of all disks in the clusters will be, for example. This is something you can do with QQ. I'm going to check on the cluster protection state. Is my cluster healthy? Is it reprotecting? Did I fill a drive? How far along is it? I'm going to list all the different connected clients. I'm going to list all current SMB sessions and all open files. This is super handy, especially if you use SMB in your environment. I'm going to find what the largest snapshots are. And then I'm going to see if any users have exceeded their quotas. So these are some examples of all the different things you can do with the Qq CLI. So let's move on to the demo. I'm going to go over to my terminal. And the first thing I need to do is I need to log in. But first, let me talk a little bit about aliases. So the QQ is the tool, right? This is the tool that I have installed. I have this on my path. It's in the local path of my machine. But because I would normally have to give it -- host and some cluster FQDN here, and maybe some other flags, I don't want to have to keep typing this all the time. So what I did is I created an alias called QQS, and if I look over here, I have actually QQM, points to one cluster. This QQM that you see me type a lot is just an alias for this entire command. Hopefully my text is not too small. Let me make it a little bit bigger here. Okay, so QQM is an alias that points to one Qumulo cluster. I made another one that points to yet another Qumulo cluster. And you can have as many of these as you want, obviously. So if you have multiple clusters, this will save you quite a bit of time. Now, the first step on our process here is that I need to log in. So I'm going to go QQM, then the API command, and then the user I want to use, which would be the main user. And it's going to ask me for my password. And then I log in. So now that I'm logged in, I have created a credential store file called userQQ that has my token. This is my REST token that you would actually, that token would also work with the REST API if you wanted to combine the two. So now I am logged in. So once I'm logged in, I can take a look for some commands. So here's what I'll do that. I'll just do QQ-H. And if I just run this by itself, you see I get quite a bit of output that I would have to scroll back and take a look. So what I would rather do is QQM-H because I want to go to my specific cluster. And then I can just send it to less. This way I can go up and down and I can search. I can search for SMB here. And just to tell me things that have SMB. But the one that I actually do the most is that I pipe it into grep and then I type in the broad category of commands that I'm looking for. So the one I was looking for is SMB. So this returns everything that has SMB. But then let's say I want to look at anything that has quotas or is related to quotas. I just type quotas, or quota in singular. There's all my different commands. So now let's say I wanted to list all the quotas in my system. I would do QQM. And then because I have tab complete enabled, I just hit tab a couple of times and it starts filling it in. And if I hit it more, it would all then show me all the different options that I have. I want to list all the quotas. Okay, so out of the box, I can just run this command and I'm gonna get some kind of output. So the first version of this output here is going to be just in JSON format. But now if I use the other command, list shares, so here's SMB list shares. This is a command that defaults to human readable. So some of our commands make it human readable to make it easier for you as the administrator to read. No, actually, to answer the middle question there, QQ is not a Linux shell, it's a Python self-executable. You do have to have Python local, but it's like it's a PyZip wrapper for the tool. So I'm gonna go back to this guy here. So you see I have the human readable, but let's say I want to actually take some of this information and feed it somewhere else. This is not the best view. I don't wanna have to grep and then find a position of this thing with a bunch of different command line tools. I can actually just output a --JSON option right there, and this will give me the raw format. Now, at first, this is kind of ugly, right? It's a little bit hard to read. I have to scroll back. Now, this is where JQ comes in. So I'm gonna get the raw output of this, I'm gonna pipe it into the JQ tool. Now, if you're new to using JQ, the most handy thing you can learn right off the bat about this tool is to use the keys option. What this would do, this will return all the different keys of the position inside of the JSON file that you're looking for. So right now I'm looking for the raw keys on whatever the raw JSON is. And then this tells me that I have 35 entries in this array. I get a JSON blob that is a JSON array that has 35 entries. So I'm kind of curious, let me take a look at the keys on the first position. I'm gonna start some single quotes and I'm gonna put index 0. I'm gonna pipe that pipe right there. This is a JSON pipe, is inside of the JSON command itself because I have the single quotes. And then I get to see the actual keys that are in position 0. So all these entries, all these indexes inside of this array, they're gonna have the same keys because they're all individual quotas. So if I look at just a single one, I get to see all the different keys inside of that. And this kind of tells me, oh, cool. I get to see all the different shares. And let's say I wanted to see if any of these guys require encryption. So I have this little guy right there. I want to just do a very brief review to see if any of my SMB shares require encryption. So I'm going to give it require encryption right there with a dot because I am pulling that key from that array. But if I remove the 0, I run this operation on all of them. So then this gets output. Now, obviously, this is not a very clean example because I have to get some more information. So if I run this again, I get JQ keys. I see that I have another option here, share name. So what if I do one of these numbers? I'm going to go to the top so it's easier for you guys to read. I want to take this and I want to create a new object. I'm going to say share name, comma, require encryption. And then I should get a new output that has all the different shares, has all my different share names, and whether they require encryption or not. So as we work through these exercises, you see that I can actually take this and feed it into like a CSV to return in a CSV format that you can open in a spreadsheet. So let's say I wanted to get some more information about this cluster. Now, incidentally, all these examples, whatever I type in here, I'll make these available in a document that then you can kind of work around with yourself. The goal of this kind of webinar is not really to learn in depth how to use JQ, but I'll be glad to help you guys offline. If you have any questions, hit me up on Slack and I'll jump in with you and we can work through these exercises. But I'll make these examples available here. So let's say I want to find out the state of my disks in my cluster, right? I have a command called cluster slots. So cluster slots, this will return quite a bit of info. So what I want, again, I want to pipe it in JQ and I want to see what keys are available. And you see I have an early index that tells me I have 23 or I have 24 different drives in this particular cluster that I'm connected to. I'm going to take a look at the first one. These are the keys. Oh, interesting. I got to give it a dot right there. So these are the keys that each one of these drives, this is the information I can get from each one of these drives. So to save me a little bit of typing, let me copy this example that I have ready over here. So what this would do, I gotta specify the cluster I'm talking to. I'm going to sort by node ID. It's kind of really unnecessary. I don't need to do this. I'm actually going to remove this from here because I don't need to sort because this output's already sorted. So I want to pull the ID, I want to pull the disk serial number and the state. So this is going to return the state of all my disks and whether they're healthy, which ID they are, which node they're in, what position they're in that node, the serial number of those disks. This is pretty handy if you're working with your customer success representative and they're asking some questions about, hey, can you get us the serial number of that disk so we can replace it? You can do all this type of stuff. So you can actually do something a little more convoluted here. I won't really break down this particular command, but this is pretty cool. I can paste this. I'm going to paste this command in here, and I'll make this available for you guys if you want to kind of get a little bit more behind the scenes with JQ. But this will output a CSV file that I can go over here on my Mac, and I'll pop it open real quick for you guys to take a look at. That would then output that as a drive report that has all the different keys and has all the different information. So this is the beauty of JSON as an output. This would be pretty difficult to do if I had to grep through a non-standard output, like if I had to kind of find my way with awk and grep and set and do all this type of stuff to find which position the thing happened to be in. JSON and JQ makes that much easier. So let's say, here's another example. Let's say I wanted to find the state of my cluster. I got to notice that I lost the drive. I can get protection status get. I run this will kind of show me what the state of my cluster is right now. It tells me what my erasure coded stripe is. It tells me how many nodes I can drop at a time. It's particularly handy if you have larger clusters and you want to verify which EC method you're using, how many drive failures I have right now remaining. So as you understand, the Qumulo cluster can lose more than 2 drives at a time. You just have to re-protect them before you can lose more drives. So this is a super handy command. And then if I had lost a drive, I can do Restriper Status. This will tell me whether restriping for a replaced drive is running. Right now, obviously, I didn't lose a drive on this particular cluster. So those are 2 examples. And again, I'll make all these available for you. So please don't be upset if I erase them from the screen. So let's say I want to find out who's connected to my cluster. I can do QQ network list connections. Now this has 2 different outputs. The default output, you just give me a big blob of JSON with their IP addresses and with the type of connection that they have. Or I can get just a count by giving it the -C flag. So I give it -C. This will kind of give me a human readable version that's table formatted that then tells me where my clients are connected. So conversely, let's say I wanted to list all the SMB sessions. I want to find out who's connected via the SMB protocol. I can do SMB list sessions. So this will give me quite a bit of output, but in this case, what I want is, I already know the key I'm looking for. Again, if you guys remember, I can do the keys. I always do the keys to find the key you're looking for, but on this webinar, I'm gonna save a little bit of time, and I already know the key, session infos, which is an array itself, and then this will list all the different users. I get their SIDs, I get their name, I get their internal Qumulo auth ID, where this user is coming from. So this will tell me all the current SMB sessions that I have. This will let me know which users are currently connected. Now, I can also find, let's say I got a complaint from one of my users that a file was locked. I have a file locked over SMB, they can't save the file. I need to know who has this file open. So I'm gonna copy this and paste it up there. Again, if you guys have any questions of how I arrive at this particular command string, I'd be glad to answer that in the Q&A session or jump in with you guys on Slack. But what is happening here on this command, I'm gonna list all file handles. These are actual file handles. They're requested by a client on the SMB protocol. And this command has a -p option that you can take a look when you do --help for the command, and I'll show you in a second here. That will resolve the paths. And then I want to find some information, and it's going to tell me I want to do a match, and the match I'm looking for is that somebody told me that the home directory is locked. For example, this could have been an Excel file or a Photoshop file. I would type that pattern that I'm trying to match. I'm doing a test to match if any path contains the word home. I run this and, I got a QQM, again, can't forget because I'm talking to a specific cluster. This tells me that the home directory is locked by this user. This is an internal auth ID from Qumulo. Now, if I wanted to see which user this was, if you guys remember, I can run this again. I can look for this number here, and I can cheat real quick and just do a quick grep for that. And this actually tells me that that value is present on this list session. So there's one of these users that has this up there. Now I can feed it into JQ, the match owner equals this, but I know now that this user is present here. And you see, I know I've saved some time in the webinar here, but I know that this is the value right there. So I know that user Joe is locking a particular file. So it's kind of a handy combination of the two here. Now, the Qq CLI is really driven to automating workflows. So a lot of this output might seem a little overwhelming at first, but once you kind of get some basic library of handy QQ and JQ combinations, you can string all these guys together and get information really, really quickly without having to slog your way through all this JSON. So another cool example here is that I want to find the largest snapshot. What is the largest snapshot in my system? You might be aware that if you go into the Qumulo UI, the actual size of the snapshot is not available in there. But here's a command where I can get the capacity used by snapshot. Again, I have to specify my alias right there. It's going to tell me the capacity used by snapshot, and that has an array called entries that has all my different snapshots. And then JQ provides a max by, or is going to kind of tell me what is the largest based on this key, capacity used bytes. Now, you see that I have to convert this to number. The reason for this is that a lot of the JSON numbers you see are actual strings, and the reason for this is that we internally encode everything in base 64, and those would be difficult to represent or deal with. So when we show you a number, it has been decoded from base 64, but gets presented as a string. So you might have to convert this to a number. In some cases, I have to do that in this case. So I can do the max by properly. And if I run this, then this will tell me what my largest snapshot is, tells me how many bytes I'm using, and what the ID of the snapshot itself is. So if you're clearing snapshots, this will tell you which one is the largest ones. Conversely, I can do one of these guys here where I am going to list the top 3 snapshots. So in the end here, this is kind of, if you guys are familiar with Python arrays and other programming languages, I know that I'm getting the last 3. I sorted this, and the way JQ sorts work is going to go from smallest to biggest, and then I'm interested in the last 3 because those will be the 3 biggest ones. And this will give me the 3 largest snapshots. So it's a pretty cool combination of tools here. Now, if you remember, we did the CSV output. Now this is going to look a little chunky on the screen because it's quite a bit of JQ in there, but it's actually pretty easy to sort out once you know what it does. So I got the capacity used per snapshot. I get an array of all the snapshots in my system. Like this, it looks like all like these guys. And then I'm going to take those entries, I'm going to sort them by number. So they're going to be in order. And then I'm going to reverse that list. For personal preferences, I want the largest one at the top. And then I'm going to create a header that I typed this text myself. I decided the values I'm interested in would be use bytes and ID, but I don't want to have capacity underscore use bytes. I want to have some more friendly text in my CSV, so I created use bytes, and I chose snap ID as the header of my CSV. And I'm going to take that array that was fed past this point, and I want to create a new array that has capacity use bytes as ID, and then at the end I convert this to CSV and I'll put it to my desktop in the snaps.csv file. So I run this sucker, it takes a second here, and now I have a report of all of my different snapshots and in my spreadsheet that I can send over to Google Sheets or whatever. This is Apple Numbers. This happens to be the spreadsheet I have on my machine here, but if you send this over to Google Sheets, you can actually then apply a filter that will convert this to like a more human readable format. It tells you the ID of the snapshot, and you get a nice little report of the capacity of all your snapshots. So this would be pretty tricky to do. I mean, the information is there if I do just the raw version of this guy here. So capacity used by snapshot. If I just get the raw JSON format and I'm trying to grep and awk my way through this, it's going to be pretty tricky. So JQ makes this stuff pretty easy. So let's say I want to find all my quotas. I'm going to do quota list quotas. I like to run -- help on any command that I haven't run in a while, so I kind of get a little bit of information about what this command does. Now this is an interesting one because it has a page size. Some of these guys, if I have a lot of output, sometimes we might actually end up paging it where we will return multiple pages of output, just because in the end these are all REST calls to the Qumulo API via the Qq CLI here. So my machine is making a REST call on the back end and getting some amount of output return. But if the output is very large, you might actually end up paging it and having it in multiple chunks. So in this case here, I do a QQ quotas list quotas. If I feed it over to JQ and I give it the keys option, you actually see that I get 2 blobs with 2 paging quotas. Now, if I wanted to get everything in the same blob, I could give it a page in size. I'm going to use tab complete. Let's say I want 100 entries. I'm okay with 100 entries. So now I run JQ keys. You see I have just a single one. So let's say I wanted to find the capacity of all my quotas. So let's work through this JQ exercise together here. I wanted to say quotas, list quotas, quota, list quotas, and I want to do page size 100. Actually, I won't even do that. I'll just do it this way. Keep it simple. I'm going to do JQ and quotas. Running quotas right on that array. So I have an array. I know it's an array and not an object because of the square brackets. Again, these are all details. I'll be glad to work through with you guys if you're more curious about how JSON and JQ is put together here. I want to go through this array and I want to get quotas. So this gives me all the quotas and these objects. Oh, or maybe I did it wrong because I'm already starting with the array. So quotas, I get all the quotas. Now, what I could also do is that I see that I have a limit. This is how big the quota can be. This is the path of where this quota is being applied to. And this is how much of that quota has been used. So I can actually just do a simple comparison of, is my usage exceeding my limit? I can do that very easily through JQ by doing a comparison where I select an item coming from the stream here through the pipe. I get all the quotas. Then I'm going to select the capacity usage. Again, I converted it to number. We got to remember, because numbers on JSON blobs coming from Qumulo are strings for the representation of very large 64 base 64 numbers. We're going to convert this to a number. No big deal. I did this in parentheses here, so this operation gets completed by in isolation here. I convert that number to a number. And then if it's bigger than my limit, show me only those. So now when I run this, again, can't forget that I'm running this on a specific Qumulo cluster, so I gotta give my alias right there at the start, QQN. I run this, and this will show me all the ones that actually, there's quite what did I do here? Team number, there's a lot of them that are exceeded. Oh, I gotta do it the other way. I only want the ones that are exceeded. So I want the capacity usage that's bigger than the limit. And this is telling me that this guy has a limit of that many bytes and has used that many bytes. So it exceeded my quota. So this is a quick way to pull which quotas are exceeded. And again, I can always kind of then string together a couple more commands in JQ and output this as a CSV to hand it off to somebody else. I don't want to hand my CIO a bunch of JSON. I'm just going to hand them a CSV or a better format Excel spreadsheet. So you can do quite a few cool things in here. So in this case, let's say I want to find all my different snapshots. So QQ snapshot list. I'm using tab complete here. Tab tells me, I need all snapshots. Again, I can get the help file. So if I haven't used a tool in a bit, you see this guy has a couple of extra options here, exclude and delete. As you know, snapshots expire, and sometimes I don't want to take a look at snapshots that are actively being deleted because they're going to skew my numbers, and I'm going to have a snapshot ID that no longer exists. But in this case, I can say exclude and delete, and I'm going to say, just type X, hit tab, exclude and delete. So I'm going to feed it right off the bat, right into JQ, and I'm going to look at the keys. And I know I have an array called entries, so I'm going to take a look at entries, and I'm going to put a JQ pipe in there, and I want the keys of entries. Now this might actually generate quite a bit of output because the entries will probably have a bunch of indexes inside of it. Yeah, is exactly what I thought. So let me look at just the first one, because I'm assuming that these are all going to look exactly the same once they're inside. So I get some information about my snapshots. I get to see which ones are being deleted, their ID, what they apply to. And I can also look for the name. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to go to entries, and then I want to look at all of them. I want to find one that has a specific name. So I'm going to do a select to choose a thing. The property I want to select is name. So select name, that equals. Actually, I'm not going to do equals because maybe I don't quite know. I want to find something that maybe has the string in it. So I'm going to do test, which does a regular expression match against the thing. So anything that has the word Joe in it, I'm going to match that. And then I'm going to close this off. So I am pulling all the entries from all the snapshots, and I'm excluding the ones in delete. And I am scrubbing through the names to see if any of them contains the word Joe. And then I run this, and then here you go. Here are all the snapshots that have the name Joe in them. So you see Joe Home 2, Joe Home Base. I have the names of some of my snapshots. So this is an example of how you can actually use JQ to kind of scrub through and find some info. And if you have the appetite for it, then you can get kind of fancy here. And I'm going to just paste this because I want to have to type the whole thing. But this big long boy here, this is going to tell me the statuses of all the relationship sources on my cluster. And then I'm going to create a header that says status enabled. Is this enable? Which target cluster I'm going to hit? What's the target's address? The source path, target path, what's the last error is. There is a shortcut to creating the key names from the actual key names, so you can create the header from the key names. I can show you how to do that too. Then I'm going to take all that and I'm going to create a new object, a new array, and I'm going to pipe that to a CSV to my desktop. So I run this sucker here, and again, I keep forgetting to specify the fact that I am talking to a specific cluster, so I have to give my alias and not the QQ tool itself. I run this. This is going to generate that CSV that now has all the statuses of all my replications, and this is what it ends up looking like. See the state, see whether they're disconnected, they're running, whether they had a final error here. So it's a pretty cool way to get a nice report with not a whole lot of typing. And the nice thing about these snippets is that once you have these sorted out, you're just ready to go. You just save them and you run them, and you save a bunch of time and get this information very, very quickly. So we're approaching the top of the hour here. We have 15 minutes left. I'd like to move on to a Q&A session. Now, I am open to staying another 30 minutes after the hour. We can work through some exercises directly if you guys would like. I can make everybody open to talk here. But I have Billy read off the questions for me, or I have to pull my glasses to look at the Q&A. Actually, let me do that myself. So Patty has a question. If you have multiple clusters that are not all of the same version, would only the new commands not work, but the rest continue to work? Yes. So if you have a cluster that is older than your Qq CLI or vice versa, the commands that exist on both will continue to work, but it's quite possible that you have commands that have been deprecated. So over the years, we've removed some commands or actually changed their syntax. So if your Qq CLI is really, really old, your cluster probably doesn't have the command in the same context anymore. But if your cluster has the same command and the Qq CLI has the same command, then you're good to go. The command should work fine. Do we have to do double tab? No, you do not. Double tab will just send you a lot of options. I mean, just save some time. Now, tab is just a thing. I mean, because in the end, if I do one of these guys here and I hit tab, what's really happening is that I am using argparse with Python. That's what's happening behind the scenes. And then I'm using my bash shells complete tool. So I have the shell complete that talks to the Python's argument parser that then talks to my script. So things might seem a little disconnected just because there's a lot going on, but that saves you a bunch of typing, having to do that. Is there a way to easily find the underlying method or in the Python mod? Yeah, actually, this is a really good question. Here, let me do a note on that. If you give it a --debug, and then you run a thing like smb list shares. And I scroll up to the top, I get my return here, but I actually get some information about the actual REST call. And you see the request up there. And I get my bearer token. You guys are free to steal it and try to hack me over here with my bearer token. I get my response. I get quite a bit of info here. So in particular, you get the request, which is pretty cool. Now, the REST API itself has a few more hooks in the information that you can retrieve through the REST API that you can't get directly from QQ. So sometimes you might actually end up using a combination of the both. So I know it's quite a bit of vomit of JSON here, but you get to see what the response was, you get to see what the call was. And hopefully that answers your question. So I'll be interested in seeing some file IO commands, moving data. Sure, you can do all this type of stuff. So we have a family of commands called fs that handle file operations. So there's quite a few of them in here. There's a fs copy, there's a fs read. You can read a directory. There's a really, one of my favorite commands is fs Walktree. This guy is pretty cool. This command, let me go up to the top here. This command will walk a tree starting at a path, and you can specify whether you're interested in files only or directories only, whether you want to walk a snapshot. You have some pretty cool then options that you can get. You can display the ownership or all attributes, and then you can send things to a file. And really cool, you can actually specify the max depth here. So let's say I want to walk my file system, QQFS Walktree at home Joe, and the max depth should be just 1, and this is actually going to return, oh God, I keep forgetting that I'm talking to this cluster here. This will return all this stuff here that again is just JSON that I can feed into something else. But let's say I want more information, I can say display all info, all attributes, and then bam, I get all the different attributes that I definitely need to pipe into JQ to see all the different attributes. I get the access time, modification time, and this guy is really fast. He can really crawl a directory tree really quickly. It is actually so fast and can output so much stuff that I would strongly recommend that you spend some time. Again, you can hit me up on Slack for this, but you want to get some understanding of the JQ streaming command, because the way JQ works, it takes this entire output and tries to process it unless you specify stream. If you do streaming, JQ streaming, you are operating on the output as it enters the JQ command. This way, I'm not just, let's say I walked my entire file system, I'm gonna give JQ like gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes worth of JSON that I am surely crash JQ. And if I run this on a Qumulo node, I'll definitely sure core that node, and the node is gonna go offline and come back because I took memory away from the Qumulo core process. So if you're gonna play around the QQFS Walktree, there are some examples that I can give you using streaming, but JQ stream is pretty cool. I'm gonna give you the compact version, and it's gonna look pretty different. So you see, I just get all these entries, but it's a lot faster because I am not waiting for the results before I start displaying things. So if I do no max depth, I'm gonna do max depth of 4, which is gonna be pretty deep. There's quite a few directories, subdirectories in this path here. You see that streaming, I get right off the bat to start working on stuff. So this is all coming to me, pretty cool. Are we able to accomplish these commands through the console? Yes. So the Qq CLI, if you log into the console, You do this all the time when you are installing a Qumulo node. For example, I want to get, this is probably everybody's first Qq command, node state get. The state get is something that we have, I'm going to run it against my cluster just so you see it, but if I do node state get, this is the first command that gets run on most Qumulo clusters because this will give you some information that we need for support. We need the cluster ID and whether the cluster is in quorum. But if you are consoled into and you log in with the admin user, then you can use QQ commands. Now the interesting thing about running that stuff on a Qumulo node like that is that you still have to log in. So I'm gonna pop a new tab open here. I'm gonna SSH into that cluster that I've been running commands against. It's called music internally. I'm gonna go music.eng.qumulo.com, and you guys are probably aware that no domain user or no local Qumulo user can log into can SSH into a Qumulo node. Admin is the only account that can SSH into a Qumulo node. So I'm gonna SSH in, I'm in, I have the keys already saved. Now if I do QQ and I run a command like SMB list shares, this is gonna fail because I need to log in still. So I still have to do QQ login and specify a user. I can say myself, but in this case, I can actually use one of my domain users. So I could do AD Joe and then type in my password. And now, I typed in the wrong password. But in any case, you get the point. I have to log into the API, even though I'm already in the node. I have to log in to the API all the same. So now another thing that is important to understand is that when I give a command that has the --path option, I am giving it a path that is relative to the root of the Qumulo file system and not Linux. So I can't just tab complete the paths because these are Linux paths and not the Qumulo shared file system path. So that's an important distinction here. And let me see, install QQ with pip. Yeah, so that's another interesting question here. So if you install the Qumulo API through pip, if you're a Python user, you probably already installed pip install Qumulo-API, you get QQ. The only difference is that QQ is going to live in a slightly different place. As long as it's in your path, it's fine. It's going to be the same command. So if you want to check the API version on the server, you would do QQ. The API version and the QQ version should match. So I'm going to do version here. This will tell me the version of my Qq CLI in this machine. And if I do QQM version, distinction here is that this is a argument for QQ. This is an API call. This is an actual API command. And that is the version in my Qumulo core. Now if I run this on a different Qumulo node, you notice again, same tool here, -- version, because QQQ and QQM, they're both aliases to the same executable in the end. If I run QQQ version, it's the same guy. It's the same dude, it lives in the same place. But if I run version on this guy here, you see that this cluster is actually running an older version of Qumulo core. So you should get those two guys to match ideally on there. So any other questions? Anything you guys like to see me pull up? Hopefully this all made sense. I know probably the most daunting part is working with the JQ, but once you get it working, it's pretty cool. It's actually pretty easy. And it's much easier in the past if you ever had to do a big old combination of grep and then aux the thing and then set the thing into tr the thing just to remove like quotes or whatever. JQ makes it much easier. Speaking of removing quotes, if I get some output like this, so SMB list shares again, because it's the one I've been using. I get some big output of stuff. SMB list shares, what's going on here? Oh, caught me here. See, this guy defaults to human readable, so I need to give it the -- JSON flag. So you get JSON format, and I feed it in JQ. If I get some information, like I'm gonna pull all the keys here. So let's do this live. I'm gonna pull all the keys. I want to get all the keys of one array element, so I know what information is available to me. I want to say, hey, what's the path? I'm gonna find a path of my, what was it again? I already forgot. Memory of a goldfish here. I want to get FS path. So I want to say .fs path. I can actually get rid of it. I don't have to have that pipe there. I just do it right there. So I get that output. Oh, FS path. Okay, this is the path of all my different SMB shares. Now, if I want to remove these quotes for me to use it in some other command, the temptation might be for you to use tr and then replace this with that, but JQ already provides that capability. You just give it a -r for raw output and you strip the quotes off for you. So that will save you some time. So question is, do you have any suggestion tips for processing the output of multiple QQ commands, merging the JSON output to generate reports? Yeah, so once you start dealing with multiple things, they're pulling multiple commands, you probably don't want to just do a one-liner. I would actually just create a bash script. If bash is my language, or whatever your favorite shell is, I'd create a shell script and then run those multiple things and probably just output them as individual CSV files or as variables inside of that shell script. I don't want to handle something that crazy, not crazy, but that complex in a one-liner, just because it becomes a little bit hard to read and figure out exactly what's going on. But I'll just feed them and put them all into a bash script and break them down individually by tasks, and then you can just put it all together. Now, putting them all together in a CSV, you just have to then ask yourself if it makes sense for all this info to be in the same CSV. You can all take them into like Excel and combine the CSVs into a more complex spreadsheet that is not quite as easy to do as a simple CSV file. And Brad has a question here. Can you go over how you would clear out a temp folder every night? Temp folder in, is this in the shared Qumulo file system? I'm assuming, right? So you have okay, perfect. All right, so first of all, I have to find that guy. So assuming I have the path, I'm gonna go QQN, and I'm gonna get help, and I'm gonna bring up all my FS commands. Okay, so what do I have? I have a couple of different ones in here. I have a command called delete tree, which is actually funny enough not showing up in here, but I have delete. I have fs delete up in here somewhere. Well, actually, you know what? Let me search for delete instead. How's that? How about that? So I have delete tree create, which would delete a directory tree, and I have fs delete, which would delete an object. So you could do it that way. Now the tree delete, this guy. This guy is a bit of a loaded gun, because this will do exactly what you ask it to do, and he will give you a warning. There's a way to bypass confirmation, because before you run it, you know, you can give it a force flag to bypass confirmation, but before you run it, you have to say, hey, I agree, I'm about to nuke all this stuff. So you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing. But this would delete an entire directory tree. So if you have a directory that has, I can go inside of that temp directory and just delete everything that's inside of it. because it's just going to wipe that directory out. But you would do exactly that, so you have to be careful how you use this guy here. We've had some incidents out in the field where more than was intended got deleted. We do have some ways of actually canceling the job, because if you go over here to, if I search for tree, I do have a way to cancel the job. So if I decided that I'm going to delete my entire root directory, we have a way to stop and cancel this, but you might want to consider taking snapshots on whatever directory you are about to run this guy on. So cool, guys. Any other questions? Any tasks you'd like to see done? Hopefully this is all making sense.
Yeah, Joe, I don't see any other questions right now, but you know, I think we can hang out if anyone else has any ones while we're wrapping up here. But maybe just thanks for everyone joining the webinar today. Just a heads up, check out our survey that you'll see here as we wrap up the webinar. Let us know how we did, if there's anything that we can change for next time. We want to do more of these to be useful for you as a Qumulo customer. And so beyond that, don't forget to reach out to us in Slack for any other questions or emojis or GIFs. We're always here to help. So I don't see any other questions in here, Joe.
I put this link on the Zoom chat. Everyone should have seen this. So if you want to work through how to get tab completion to work on your local Qumulo CLI, Qq CLI, you can check out that article right there. Again, is there more Q&A there? Cool, thank you, you're welcome. Is there a way to delete files, less access? Yeah, you could totally do that. You would have to, so Matt Davis has a question. Can you delete files that last access date greater than 10 days? You can do this. Now, when I do the Qq FS Walktree, and I give it a path, again, my home Joe, and I set a max depth of however deep I want to go. In this case, I want to do just the first one, and then I want to display all attributes because I want to get my A time as an attribute. So I'm going to give it a JQ here. Now I have what's going on? Did I lose my connection? No, there it goes. So I have A time. A time is in here. Now, when you're dealing with A time, a lot of the way that we handle time internally, sometimes we handle time by epoch seconds, sometimes we handle times by an actual access time like this. The catch is, Matt, you have to have A time enabled on your cluster. So Qumulo clusters out of the box do not have A time recording enabled. So you have to turn this on. You have to turn on A time. So if I do Qq fs get A time settings, you have to be recording A time. Right, so it has to be turned on, and it has to be in a granularity. It has to be whatever you actually intended. But then you can easily just grab for that stuff and then pipe it into some other command to do a thing. So I can run an FS Walktree, find all the objects that have a certain A time, and then I can feed those paths, because I can then easily retrieve those paths, or file IDs, internal Qumulo file IDs, and feed them into something else. So it's very, very doable without a whole lot of hassle. So Chuck asked, you mentioned sharing the commands in the demo. I'm just going to put a quick PDF together on my own notes in here, and I can put them on the, I'll put them in the customer channel if you have access to the customer channel in Slack, and then we'll talk internally here to figure out how we can just broadcast it to the entire registration list of people that sign up for the webinar. We'll just send it to everybody. There you go. So Matt, you have that enabled on your system. Perfect. You just hit me up on Slack. I'm Joe on Slack. Just hit me up, and then we can actually walk through this if you like. And Again, I would recommend you take a snapshot of whatever directory you're about to unleash delete on. But yeah, it should be totally doable. All right, Bill has a question here. What is the overhead for enable 8 times? So the overhead is, let me see what options we have in here. Let me see what options I have. So let me get dash help. So I can set the granularity to be hour, day, or week. So it's not too bad. We actually, when we first put A time in our code, we tested to see just true A time. How bad is true A time? Every time you touch a file, you turn that read into a write. And it was really bad. It was like 50% impact. Now, when we set the granularity to be hour, day, a week, it's really not that bad. You won't really notice a huge impact from having this turned on. You're very welcome, Mr. Liardini. Miss you too. Gotta bring you back over here, or at the very least, hit you up on the field. So hopefully that answers your question, Bill. It's really not too bad to turn on. There is some impact. I think we have a care article that describes a little bit more information about this. There's going to be a little bit of an impact, but I think it's going to be less than 10%, because you are converting reads into writes. That's the downside, but you're probably aware of this, you know, since you asked the question. Cool. Any more questions out from the field? Cool. All right, everyone. So we will make the recording available. You have the video of this, and then I'll make that document available for everyone. But again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to jump in. You're very welcome, Chuck. And Vinay, also thank you very much. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. See you on Slack. If you have any questions, again, please do not hesitate to reach out. My name is, my email is super easy to find, just joe@Qumulo. I'll put the slide up here. Let me go up to the top again. So just joe@Qumulo, easy to find. Can't be any easier to find me. So hit me up on Slack. I'll be very glad to jump in on a one-on-one if you'd like to work through a particular problem. I have no problem doing that. Okay, guys. See